Hi, everyone. So, in the first part of the mental health unit, we talked about what mental health is, and we also talked about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which, to summarize, means that we have to have our basic physiological and safety needs met in order to be able to achieve our fullest potential. So, we just talked about the fact, too, that everybody has mental health and sometimes it's more optimal than other times. And one of the major factors that plays a large role in our mental well being is stress and our ability to manage stress. So that's what this part is going to be about here. And I know that as teenagers, you're all under a lot of stress. Maybe it's from friends, maybe it's from family, maybe it's from your living situation, maybe it's relationships. There's a lot of things that you guys have to be stressed about right now. And I'm sure you've heard it before, oh, you're young, you have nothing to worry about. Just wait until you're older. And that's not true. That's really invalidating to your feelings. And I know that you all have stressful situations, and nobody can tell you how you should feel. You feel the way that you do, and that's completely valid. So, what we're going to talk about is how to identify stress, what it is, and maybe how to cope with it as well. So, stress is the effect of physical and psychological demands on a person. So a stressor is that demand that's placed on the body. So it can be a physical stress. Like a physical stress would be like you're out in a desert, so you're in a really hot environment, so your body, has to try to cope with that. Or psychological stresses, meaning you're in a constant state of anxiety, or you're not living in a safe place, or you have a negative relationship with your partner or with your friends. So any one of these things are stressors. So it's a demand placed on the body. It can be physical, it can be psychological, it can be environmental, cognitive, which means mental, and just other life events in general can be stressors on you. So the effects of stress, if they're left unmanaged, so you can see an increased heart rate. Think about like when you're in a stressful situation, your heart rate goes up. Decreased immunity too. It's really taxing on the body to be in a constant state of stress. So your immune system is not functioning optimally if you are constantly stressed. Increased risk of suicide. Again, if it's not treated, it doesn't mean that everybody that has stress will eventually commit suicide. That's not at all what that's saying. It's just saying that if you have unmanaged stress and you don't have a lot of coping mechanisms to deal with that stress, then you do have an increased risk of depression, self injury, or suicide. It also has uh, physical stresses on the body. So you might see a change in skin texture, loss of skin tone, loss of moisture, decreased immunity, like we talked about, hormonal imbalances. Really, if you look at this, every single part of the body can be affected. And there's a lot of this relationship between gut health and brain health. So decreased nutrient absorption, alterations in gut motility, meaning maybe food isn't moving through your digestive tract as easily, leaky gut, and this is a really important thing that everybody is studying right now. So the relationship between brain and gut health. So it really has a large impact, and obviously the brain. If you're stressed, there's going to be a lot of fatigue. You're going to be brain fog, reduced concentration, decreased mood. So these are all things that we would want to avoid. So we need to figure out ways to manage our stress. So what is depression? Depression is the condition of feeling apathetic, hopeless, and withdrawn from others. There may be parts of your life where it's a situational depression, like if something happens in your life and it's a really sad event, you may feel depression that'll last a couple weeks, but chronic depression is a little bit different. So, regardless of what type of depression you have, what a person who is depressed needs is understanding, encouragement, and an accurate diagnosis. Depression can absolutely be treated, and normal life can be restored. Absolutely. There's therapy, there's medication. And so, really, if somebody comes to you and says that they're depressed, it's when you need to be encouraging, okay, let's go talk to somebody, let's get you help, let's get you a diagnosis and see if we can treat this. Because it's not something that you can just snap out of. The symptoms of depression. Sometimes it can disguise itself as like sicknesses. So somebody can just feel like run down, like they have a bug, chronic fatigue syndrome. They're always tired. They have insomnia. They're not sleeping. So that being said, some people may not even recognize that they have depression. So you really have to pay attention to the symptoms. So these chemical changes that are happening in the brain can greatly affect your mood. So you're going to have feelings of hopelessness, feeling sad or empty, thoughts of death or suicide. That's one of the symptoms, is that you have a preoccupation with death. Aches and pains, um, different eating habits, lack of appetite, poor memory, concentration, anger, no pleasure in activities that you once took pleasure in, and feeling of excessive guilt or just like pressure, feeling worthless. So, all of these are some of the common symptoms of depression. Depression is going to look different for every person, but these are just some of the more common symptoms that you may see. And I want to point these out because I want you to be able to recognize it in yourself. And I also want you to be able to recognize it in other people. So if you notice that a friend, a relative is showing any of these characteristics, then maybe that's something that you can talk to somebody else about, say, like, I'm worried about this person. I'm wondering if there's anything that we should say to them, if there's anything that we could do. So I just want you to be aware of these characteristics again for yourself and for others that you care about. And depression is it's not something that the person can control. Maybe it was triggered by some sort of experience in their life, some situational event, or maybe the person seems to have this perfect life and nobody can understand why they're sad or why they're not sleeping or why they're constantly saying they're not feeling well. But really, there's a large genetic component to it. Maybe there's nothing wrong with that person's life from the outside, but their brain chemistry causes them to have depression. So that's shown by this picture here. So this is a brain scan of an individual with and without depression. You can see the person that does not have depression has a lot more brain activity, and that's shown in these lighter colors. And somebody who's depressed, there's such a smaller amount of brain activity in their brain. So again, this is absolutely nothing that this person can control. It's just their brain chemistry and their brain makeup and their genetics, really. Um, so ways to manage stress, because we're kind of, I guess, linking stress and depression together for right now because, like we talked about earlier, it can be, if left unmanaged, it can lead to depression. So, ways to manage stress, there's lots of these. Listen to your favorite song. Therapies are great. Exercise, definitely. We talked about that in the last chapter. Come up with a hobby, yoga, meditation, and you guys all know how I feel about those two. Spend time in nature and practice good time management skills. Like I said, there's so many of these infographics out there. So if this one doesn't resonate with you, maybe you can find one that does. And also, I think it's really important to point out the resources for help. So you have your guidance counselors, teachers, administration, always available to listen. And I added even from afar because even though we're not physically together, you can still absolutely reach out to anybody that you feel like could be of help to you. And then there's therapists as well. And therapists sometimes, maybe if you go to see a therapist and you notice that it isn't really helping you, then don't be afraid to try somebody else. Maybe one person just doesn't fit with your personality, and that's perfectly fine. Their therapists have different personalities, just like all of you have different personalities. So, like I said, maybe if the first therapist that you go and talk to doesn't really seem to help, just give it another shot. Maybe try a different therapist. Helpguide.org, a nonprofit resource for stress management, Medline Plus, and there's some more hotlines for outreach here. So when you download these notes, then you can click on any of these links and look at those a little bit more in depth. So let me know if you have any questions on depression, stress management, and then we'll be looking into these a little bit more as we go through the mental health unit.